The Glean platform is designed in a way which minimizes your AI spend. You take the basic AI tools from Claude or ChatGPT, and if you start to connect those tools with your enterprise systems using MCP, one thing that happens is that even the simplest tasks that you need to do with AI, these systems are very brute force. And they spend a lot of tokens just trying to assemble the right context to complete that task. And that actually is where all of the cost comes from. So when you bring Glean inside the company, you can actually connect Glean as a backend, as a context provider into ChatGPT and Claude and Gemini. And we can actually, for any given task, immediately give the right context, the right data to these AI tools so that they can then complete their work. And as a result, half your AI token consumption.
Hi everybody, good afternoon, good evening, and good morning, wherever you are. Thank you very much for joining another episode of the Boardroom Club. My name is Yossi Garmazi, and I'm joining also by a good friend of mine, Sanat Muli. Sanat.
Hi everyone, thank you so much for joining us on the Boardroom Club today.
So today we are fortunate enough to interview none other than Arvind Jain, founder and CEO of Glean, a company that revolutionizing our organization discover, access, and leverage knowledge across workplace through AI. Most recently, they raised $150 million Series F at a $7.2 billion valuation. Arvind is also the founder of Rubrik, the cyber unicorn. So Arvind, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you for having me. Really excited to be here.
The pleasure is all ours. So, Arvind, I want to start with a question about all the company that you founded, as I mentioned in the intro, because you built around two data problems, right? With Rubrik, it was about protecting the data. Now with Glean, it's about making it useful. But was there any critical mindset shift? Something that you needed to unlearn when you transition from Rubrik to Glean?
I mean, these two companies couldn't be more different. Like, of course, both the companies are enterprise software companies. We build products, bring it to enterprises who need them. But the nature of the business, the problem was so different between these two companies. Rubrik was a product that was an established market. We had many, many different competitors at the time when we started the company, and we had to go with a better technology, a modern product, and tap into the established budgets that companies already had to buy a product like ours, which was a data protection product. And now, when we started Glean, suddenly the environment was completely different. Like we were selling a product that nobody was used to buying. There was no budget for it. There was no precedent for actually buying search products in the enterprise. And so we had to create the market. We had no competition, nobody to actually really go and compare ourselves with. But we had to actually convince the market that a product like this was needed. So these were like two very different journeys. Also, the Glean product is a product that every single person in your company uses. The Rubrik product was a product that was used by only one or two people who would actually were also the buyers of the product. So it sort of like fundamentally changes how you build the company. Like for example, in Glean, we couldn't actually go and start selling the product and make revenue while at the same time building it, which is what we did at Rubrik. At Glean, we didn't have that chance. We had to actually go and first build a product, get it to a really, really good place, because all the users of our product, they were not actually people that we knew. We didn't have relationships with. One person at a company, but then there are 1,000 other people who are going to use your product. So these were very different journeys. A lot of things that we had to unlearn, a lot of things that we had to do differently. And I can go endlessly on just this one question, but I'll stop there and see if you have any specific questions there.
It's fascinating moving from selling only to the CISOs of the company to selling to all of the company's employees at the end, because they are the users, right? But what was the aha moment when you knew that the Glean idea was not only nuanced in business, but rather a massive market opportunity? I've heard that you started at the Kleiner Perkins basement, but what was the moment that you actually understood that there is actually a big market opportunity there?
Well, I mean, I knew it. I felt it even before we started the company. And I had a very simple reason. I don't do market analysis. I don't do the total addressable market. In fact, it's funny that I didn't even know what TAM is, when we were starting the company. I mean, I'm joking, but kind of like, we never really thought about that. Like, what I knew was that every person who I knew found it hard to find the information that they needed to do their work. And you would have people complain all the time. In fact, we saw this problem at Rubrik. Everybody in our company was complaining that they cannot find the information that they need to do their work. In fact, they also could not find people who could help them figure out and help them in their day-to-day jobs. So the problem is kind of always been there, but nobody was actually able to build a successful business out of it. And when we were starting the company, I talked to a bunch of people, and they all sort of mostly like, they all identified that, yes, this is a good problem. Their employees have it. But they all also felt that maybe this was not the most important problem to be solved and it'll be hard to build a company. So the advice
Yeah.
that I was getting was opposite, like, do not do this kind of a thing. But I always had the belief, and it was a journey, like it took time before people started to understand it. But the moment when I felt that, yes, we're going to be a huge, big company was when we got the first kudos from our customers who told us that, hey, this is the very first time search has ever worked in the enterprise for us. You're the first ones to build that product. In fact, I hear it almost on a daily basis. Today, I was in the morning in a meeting with one of the largest databases company in the world, and I got exactly that same comment from them that you're the first ones to make it work. So I think when we started to get that recognition for that we built a good product was when we knew that yes, we're in business is going to be a huge thing.
It's interesting because there were like a few companies that tried but struggled very much so, right? Like HP and even Google search, but you succeeded. I was curious if you can tell us, maybe share with the audience, what was one of the contrarian technical bets that you took at the beginning of the way that turned out to matter the most?
So first, I think the problem itself, in some ways, it breaks the rule of startups. We started by saying that we're going to build a general product that's going to help every single person inside the company. And so it was kind of opposite of focus in some ways. Like we were not actually saying that, hey, can we go and help this particular user population? Can we go and build a product for the customer support teams or for engineers? We said, no, we want to actually solve the problem in a more horizontal manner for everybody in the world, for every person in every company, inside the world. And so that was sort of a little bit at odds with typical startup advice that you would get. But we did it because that was what we felt was a big opportunity for us. And we wanted to build a broad, very large company, not a point solution for a specific user base. But in terms of technical decisions, so one of the decisions that we made, so remember like 2019 is when we were starting, and this is very much the peak of SaaS, and every new tech company, like they would think about building a product in a SaaS model. But for us, we had a very interesting decision to be made, which was when we go to a company, imagine this, like, let's say we go to a large company and we say that, why don't you actually give us all of your data? And we will actually take it from your environment, put it into our SaaS cloud, and then we're going to build a search experience on top of that. And we are a startup and we are 2 months old and we have 5 engineers and we don't have a security team. And nobody was going to feel comfortable doing that. So instead, we made a decision that we will actually build the technology in a single tenant model, and you could deploy Glean inside the customer's own environment. So none of their data leaves their VPC, their sort of security boundary. And that was actually a very critical decision. That was not the norm, but it actually helped us gain that trust and comfort that large enterprises needed to actually solve that problem that they had. And so that turned out to be a very, very good decision for us till today.
It turned out to work out very well because you reached $100 million of ARR at the beginning of 25 and then double it by the end of 25. But it's interesting because you mentioned all the SaaS companies that usually when companies get to this $100 million ARR milestone, they go to sort of like a growth wall. So I was curious, was it driven by a change in sales motion, like moving from engineering teams to the C-suites, or maybe a deeper shift in how enterprises budget for AI agents that are more inclined to do so and pay? Or
Our business is accelerating, and actually it's accelerating faster every year. And so we are well past that 200 number also that you mentioned. And a lot of that growth is driven by the fact that we are also in this amazing technology moment. Every enterprise today wants to embrace AI. They want to bring automation through agents to different business processes that they have. And Glean is the pioneer and the most robust context platform to make AI work inside your company. Imagine, like, take anything that you want to do with AI inside your company. You have to work with data and information inside your company. You have to take actions in your enterprise systems. That's what we do as humans, and that's what AI agents have to do. And the fact that we did all that investment over the last 7 years and built this truly horizontal, comprehensive RAG and search platform over all of your enterprise data and information, that became one of the most important building blocks in your AI architecture. So today, every enterprise, when they're looking at their AI strategy, you can think of AI strategy or AI tech stack at three different levels. At the top level, you have agents and applications that users experience, where they're seeing AI capabilities. At the bottom layer, you have the intelligence that comes from models. And in between, you have this context graph and enterprise connectivity layer, which is bringing the specific sort of data and information and the know-how of how your company works to these AI models. And so that middle layer is something that we are known to be the strongest player in. And that's why, like every company, as they think about their AI strategy, we have become a core part of that sort of technical architecture that they are designing.
There has been a lot of noise about token volume. It's sort of like KPI, right? Like $100,000 or $1 million per engineer or something of that sort. So how do you think about the real measure of value? And how does this specifically, let's say, impact Glean business model, if at all?
That's actually the top question that every enterprise today has on their mind. Or actually, two questions. One is just the rising cost of AI. While you can have these vanity metrics, like how many tokens every individual is consuming, and that's a measure of how AI forward you are. But actually, the other problem with that metric is that it's actually real cost. Like the more tokens your employees use, you have to figure out where to bring that money from. And if there is no value being generated, that becomes a really hard thing for companies. So like most of the enterprises are actually in that mode where they feel like value realization has not happened, but the costs are increasing. So from point of view of how we tackle that. So number one, the Glean platform actually is designed in a way which minimizes your AI spend. If you take the basic AI tools from Claude or ChatGPT, and if you start to connect those tools with your enterprise systems using MCP, one thing that happens is that even the simplest tasks that you need to do with AI, these systems are very brute force, and they spend a lot of tokens just trying to assemble the right context to complete that task. And that actually is where all of the cost comes from. So when you bring Glean inside the company, you can actually connect Glean as a backend, as a context provider into ChatGPT and Claude and Gemini. And we can actually, for any given task, immediately give the right context, the right data to these AI tools so that they can then complete their work. And as a result, half your AI token consumption. So that's sort of one part of people think of us as just a hard cost savings for their AI stack. But then the second thing is, we are also, of course, building an AI product. And the way we actually drive value is that we focus on actual use cases. We're not actually selling AI technology. We allow you as a customer to actually automate and build agents for the most expensive business processes that you have inside your company. So imagine, for example, legal teams redlining contracts, which is very expensive, sales teams filling out RFPs, customer support resolving tickets on a daily basis as that customers are filing. All of these use cases, you can actually build agents in Glean to bring automation, almost full automation or 90% automation to these different tasks. And the good thing is that each one of those tasks have an associated cost. For example, companies already measure that their cost to resolve a customer ticket is about $120, let's say. And now you bring the Glean agent to actually do the first round of triaging and resolve maybe 80% of the tickets. You can actually bring down that cost from $120 to $30, let's say, right? And that is sort of so now you have a hard measure of ROI. So you're not just talking about personal productivity or time saved. You're solving a specific business problem, and you had a clear understanding of how much it costed you before and now how much it costs you now after the Glean agent. And so that's sort of how we help businesses compute the ROI of AI and then justify their purchase of Glean.
I think the case study that you're alluding to was about Claude and about the MCP that specifically, I will mention it for the audience, Glean preferred 2.5 times as often as off-the-shelf MCP tools and specifically consumed 30% less tokens of Claude Cowork, which is obviously a big deal for all the enterprises. But I was wondering, when you talk with all these big enterprises like say Dell or T-Mobile, is the conversation is more about accuracy, maybe the token economics, or even about traceability, knowing exactly which document informed the AI reasoning at the end? Or is it something else?
All three of them. So first is, are agents actually doing things correctly? Are they using the right information and data? Second, are agents reliable? Do they always sort of perform in an expected manner, or do they sometimes, go off the rails? And third, the cost. So all of those are important considerations for businesses. But there's a change in like overall sentiment. Last year, most of the discussion used to be focused on the accuracy of agents. And in the
Yeah.
last 2 months, most of the discussions that we hear is no longer about accuracy, because at first the models have gotten better, so AI agents are now performing better than ever before. But the real pain point now immediately is the cost of AI, the token consumption. And we, like every day, we talk to enterprise customers and they share that they had a certain budget for AI this year and they've already consumed it in the first quarter of the year itself. And for some of those companies, they're saying their token consumption is doubling every week. So today, the top of the mind consideration for most enterprises is, how do I keep these systems from bankrupting us? Like that's sort of like, the right now the bigger concern for businesses.
It seems like an endless loop because you use AI more. So maybe you need less employees, but then you pay more for all the tokens that you use. And I wanted to ask you about another big products of yours. Of course, the rollout of the Agentic Engine 2. You introduce fast, but also thinking modes, where thinking modes achieved 94% answer completeness. But why was it important to give user control over the reasoning instead of simply making the AI as powerful as it gets? Was it also about the unit economics of it, or?
It's a very good question. As a user, generally, you would not have a understanding of what thinking level to use in a model, or in fact, what model to pick for a given task. Like in Glean, we support all the dominant models that are out there, including Gemini, GPT, Claude, NVIDIA's models, and even open source models. So we support them all. But as an end user, like imagine you are a paralegal, or you're in the finance team or in customer support. You have no idea which model is better for what task, and you also don't know how much you want the model to think. I mean, these are not things that you can really do. Some advanced users may have a good understanding based on their repetitive use of AI. They've sort of gotten this feeling now that sometimes they want AI to think more, sometimes less. So we give all of these options to users to manually go and select what models to choose for any given task, or what thinking level to use. But about 2% of users actually choose that, and 98% of them are using the auto mode. The system chooses for them what's the right model or what's the right reasoning level. So why do we even do it? Why do we actually give this option? It's because ultimately AI by itself doesn't know anything. All the things that AI today know are basically things that learn from humans. And even though only 2% of the people actually choose models or choose reasoning levels, we need to learn from their brain, their insights. That's the reason why we give these choices to end users, so that we can then use that data to ultimately build a better auto selector for models or for thinking level in the future. That's the source of learning that it's going to help us build that, improve our ability to pick the right models.
It's all about the user experience at the end, indeed. And okay, so Arvind, I do have one last question before I pass the mic to Sanad. So obviously, Glean, search engine inside the organization, but What do you think the search inside the organization will look like 5 years from now? Specifically considering that people say, okay, dashboards are gone, but do you think there will be another iteration of search inside the organization or?
Search is changing very, very rapidly. Our own product started with you would ask questions, and you could ask questions in natural language. Even in 2019, we're actually the world's first enterprise generative AI company, the first ones to train transformer models inside the enterprise. So, but our first version of the product was like that. It looked and felt like the traditional Google. And then now we see more than 50% of the users not wanting to use that method. In fact, they want to actually do Q&A. They want to converse, they want to ask questions, and they want a precise answer to come back to them. But it's not just questions and answers. You, of course, do a lot more things with AI. AI is actually becoming more like co-working with you, right? These things are blending. So search, knowledge access, knowledge management, assistance, and co-working is sort of all getting blended into this one uniform product experience where you feel like now that I have somebody on the other side, a very smart individual who knows everything about my work life, that knows everything about how our company works, and can actually help me continuously with whatever questions I have. I don't think anybody knows what's going to happen in the next 5 years because this technology changes so fast. I think even in the next 1 year, a lot of things are going to happen, and I'll share one of those, which is the search will actually also change from being a reactive technology to a proactive technology. And by search, I mean like search and AI assistants in general.
Sort
So
of like
where
predictive or?
yeah, predictive. Yeah. So we're like, like imagine this, like you have a system now which truly understands you and your work life and OKRs, things you need to get done this quarter. It knows about all the weekly tasks that are on your plate, and it'll actually pick some of them and actually do it ahead of time for you. Or like before you actually ask for some question, it kind of already knows that you need certain pieces of information based on the projects that you're working on, and it proactively surfaces that information back to you. That is going to be one big change in search and AI systems is they're going to shift from being reactive to being very proactive, powered by the deep knowledge of that individual, which needs you, of course, to build that context graph for the enterprise, which is what we specialize in.
The future looks bright, and I can't wait. Not to say 5 years, even in the next 12 months, as you mentioned. So, Arvind, thank you so much. It's really been a joy. And Sanat, without further ado, the floor is yours. Take us home.
Yeah, of course. Thank you so much for joining us today, and really interesting learning about some of the themes around AI cost savings and then maximizing work per token that you were talking about. It's 2026. Every resume claims some level of AI expertise. What specific signals or questions would you kind of use to identify this AI builder mindset, and how important is it for people at Glean to have this?
We have this new process where we test for AI fluency of a candidate. But in reality, we're not looking for, hey, is somebody already an expert with AI? Do they use AI a lot in their personal or work life? That's not what we're really trying to look for. Ultimately, our hiring process is the same. We always look for people who are curious, who are always trying to learn new technologies, new ways of doing things, who are creative, who like to work hard, who are good team players. So the criteria is actually the same, but AI is giving us an opportunity since it is the most fundamental sort of a new technology that we've seen in the last couple of years. It gives us a place to see, test for that curiosity and test for that, like who's trying to reinvent themselves. So like somebody has done a lot of creative things with AI, it shows us that they are those curious types who we want in our company.
It makes sense. And then kind of, moving to the next part of it, which is when you're looking for candidates, do you kind of see if they naturally reach for AI tools when working on their work when building, or how do you kind of approach this? What does it signal when a candidate does not use AI as an example?
First, we have this for every role, we actually ask our hiring managers to create an interview guide for that role. Typically we'll do 4 interviews for any given role. And within those 4 interviews, we put enough questions in there to test for whether the candidate has been using either AI or some other new technologies. It doesn't have to be AI actively in their job. And so to take, for example, software engineers. Before our interview was to actually ask them to write code by themselves. Today, we don't actually ask them to do that. Today, in fact, we have actually made our assignment, like, that is part of the interview process, a lot more complex, that there is no way for you to be able to succeed in that interview unless if you use the code gen tools. And so that's sort of like how we've changed our interview process, the kind of questions that we ask. Let's take marketing, for example. We'll ask them to actually create a picture perfect pitch deck for our own product. And the only way for you to do a picture perfect pitch deck in 2 hours by using AI. So that's sort of like, how the interview process is changing. And they're very happy, like, with people who are effectively using this technology and in fact using it to actually get stronger in areas that they were otherwise not good at. And it's okay. Like in the past, we would have not hired somebody who didn't have really good, as if in marketing, generating slide deck was a very important skill. We would make sure that they are able to do that. They're PowerPoint experts. But now we don't need to because we know that, they can just use AI to do it.
It is quite amazing given how you guys started in, you said 2019, and this was pre LLM popularity, which happened a little later. So it's really nice to see how this has changed. And kind of moving gears a little bit to before Rubrik times for you. I know you launched a Google Map Maker in India, which is a massive ground up data initiative. What did mapping these physical streets teach you about mapping messy, unstructured data inside the modern enterprises?
Oh, that's a very interesting question. For those who don't know what MapMaker is, so this is 2005, and Maps as an online product exists, but only in a few countries in the world, like maybe around 10 or so. And for the remaining 190 companies, there is no way, there is no data even available. Like, can't even license, like actual, like, roads being mapped anywhere. So we
Wow.
started this project where we would ask actually end users to go and navigate the satellite terrain imagery and actually start to draw roads and points of interest on it. And that's how, like, Google originally built maps for all the 200 plus countries in the world using MapMaker. The motivation was initially India because I was running Google India and we couldn't, maps didn't used to work there. And I actually went to the Surveyor General of the country and like many government agencies just to find out that there's no data available. The India was just not mapped. And so we had to do it ourselves. And I think like the learnings from that can apply to search is number one, like, when you ask people to create data, they're never precise. They will, like, when they're drawing a road on using a pencil on the satellite imagery, they will not be accurate on that, right? From a geo perspective, when they're adding a point of interest, they will misspell those words. So there's like a lot of error which is sort of inherent in humans when they do work. It's never precise information. So now coming back to Glean, and when we say that, hey, look, you can come to Glean and you can ask any questions that you have, and we'll use all of your company's information and pick the most recent, up to date, high quality information and give you the right answer. We have to fundamentally sort of build our algorithms, keeping in mind that there's a lot of stale and out of date and low quality information sitting alongside high quality, fresh, up to date information. And you have to figure out a way to disambiguate and kind of learn from the crowd. Like the maps was the same thing when multiple people could add the same point of interest, and we would learn from the wisdom of the crowd. And you do the same thing in the enterprise. Like when multiple people are writing about the same topic, you kind of see where is the consensus emerging, or who are the people who are subject matter experts on those topics. Give more weight to that information. So many of these challenges are actually very, very similar across those two products.
Nice, nice. And on that note, do you think now with the AI boom that we're seeing with Gen AI, especially, is there a chance for additional tech hubs to flourish in places like India, for example, where, you set up Google Maps? And do you see this chance for additional tech hubs?
So first, I mean, if you look at already India specifically is probably the second largest, if not the largest, tech workforce in the world. And there are major hubs, there in Bangalore and Pune and New Delhi and others. The interesting thing with AI is that it's democratizing the ability to create to a far greater number of people. Before, like when you had to learn Python or you had to learn C++ to actually go and create and build systems, it was limited to a small number of people who had sort of gone through those engineering programs and degrees. But now, if you look at what AI is doing, it's actually allowing a marketer to create an interesting system. It's allowing a legal somebody as a lawyer to actually create very interesting systems. Is making technology and building a lot more accessible, which basically should result in a lot more hubs, as you mentioned. All you need is somebody who's creative, who wants to build, and then AI can take care of educating them and driving them to build great products.
That's super exciting for the future. And kind of shifting gears a bit to maybe more personal leadership and entrepreneurship questions. What advice would you give founders who must personally manage operational complexities of a fast growing startup?
First, I feel like I'm myself learning all the time and I'm making about 10 mistakes every day. So nobody should feel bad about mistakes that they make because every startup is unique, every situation is unique, and you are not going to get all the decisions right. And you just have to sort of accept that. And I think what matters more is your reaction to those failures or those wrong decisions. Like, can you go correct? Can you improve yourself? Can you avoid making that same mistake again? So that's just first of all, par for the course. That's how things are. But my advice to founders, the most important advice is to not give up because startup journeys are hard and you're going to make those mistakes and you're going to find it very, very hard to scale the company operationally. You will feel like, you don't have the right leadership and it's all okay. I think what it takes to build a great company is to persist and not to give up. That's the number one reason for a failure. And so as long as you can avoid that, and it's like a marathon, you just have to fight. You just have to every day get a little bit better to actually ultimately go and finish that.
That's really good advice. And I guess about the AI native companies, what does it mean to be an AI native startup today? We're hearing it more and more. In your mind, what does that kind of entail?
Well, initially it meant that you just have one person and you can build the whole company and get $1 billion in revenue. But I'm actually absolutely not a believer in that. Ultimately, it's people who create value. And AI today is no more than a very useful tool for all of us as humans. So, but what does it mean to be AI first is, to me, it means that are you willing to start from first principles for any challenge that you have for how you build your organization, how you build different teams, how you solve specific problems. It's not so much that, hey, I need to just use more and more and more AI. It's more that AI allows you to do things differently, build teams differently. And as long as you're open to that and aware of the latest technology, that is sort of what it would mean to build a company in a new way. And one thing that I would add there, something that I'm truly passionate about, is you will build a truly AI native company if you hire new grads in your startup early on because they don't know the traditional way of doing things. Sometimes it's hard to unlearn. Like the first question that Yossi asked me was, what did I have to unlearn from Rubrik to Glean? And as the older you get, the more experience you get, the harder it becomes to unlearn things. And so luckily new grads don't have to unlearn anything because they don't know anything. So I think we see this all the time, like in our company, a lot of processes that have changed in a AI native sort of way of doing things. That change has come from new grads.
Nice. Yeah, that makes sense. And in your lifetime, who's influenced you the most as a mentor? What lesson still shapes how you lead massive companies today?
I don't have a specific person to point to. I have benefited from guidance and advice of so many people, like all of my past managers, but also industry visionaries and leaders. You just have to read and listen to what Bill Gates and Steve Jobs and all these iconic leaders have to say about how to build companies and how to build the right culture. And you just learn from massively from each one of those. One thing that I would say is that I actually find myself learning more from not people who mentor me officially or are my coach or my managers. I tend to learn a lot more from all the other people inside our company. For example, those new graduates or our engineers, our folks in marketing and sales. Every day, I think you get very, very interesting perspectives from people who are not yet at the highest levels of leadership.
Outside of work, what hobbies, passions help you disconnect and recharge for the next day and to keep going on the marathon?
I luckily I don't feel the need to disconnect. I mean, I actually love my day-to-day work. It's actually very energizing. It's a big luxury to have amazing colleagues that you can go and brainstorm ideas with and build things that are like amazing products with them. So like for me, my work kind of defines mostly my life. I mean, I don't have too many interests outside of it, but I do have a few, and which are I love to play sports. I play a lot of tennis, and in fact, any sport that somebody is willing to play with me, that's my main hobby.
Nice. If you could have coffee with anyone, including a historical figure, who would it be and why?
Wow, that's a good question. I would love to have coffee with Bill Gates. I worked for him. I was actually in Microsoft for a couple of years. And it's just really incredible how bold one can actually think and how you sort of create this vision which feels almost unrealistic. Larry Page was the same way at Google. A lot of things that he would talk about like would feel like April 1's like joke to me. No, this cannot be done. For me, it's a skill that I have to actually keep fighting to learn, like how to sort of go and think about things that feel very unrealistic, but then go and make them happen.
Alternative career path. If you're not working at Glean today, what do you think you'd be doing instead?
I think I would have been a teacher or a professor at a college.
Perfect. Final question. I'll hand it back to Yossi. You want to do this one?
So the hardest question of them all: what is your favorite movie of all time?
Favorite movie. Well, I really liked The Shawshank Redemption. That was one of a really cool movie, very inspiring, very touching for me. I watched it a few times.
You're actually not the first speaker that mentioned the Shawshank Redemption, so I guess it's a classic, right? Arvind, thank you so much for joining us. It's really been fun to hosting you. So thank you so much for joining us. And for everybody else in the audience, so stay tuned. We have other episodes from the CTO of Texas Instruments, COO of Arvi, and a bunch of other interesting folks. So stay tuned.
Thank you for having me.